And also keep in mind that caregiving is it's an essential human experience, and it may not always be fun, but it is an initiation. Like, we may feel challenged in the role, but we're learning things. We're learning really important lessons while we're in the experience, even if it goes on for years. And when it ends, and it will end because everything ends, we're going to come out of the experience with gifts of wisdom and knowledge that are really needed in the world around us.
Hello, and welcome to Not Born Yesterday, a podcast dedicated to older adults and the challenges and joys of aging. I'm Miriam Goodman. Not Born Yesterday examines the problems and solutions of growing older today. We bring you the wisdom and voices of experts in the field of aging and offer tips on how to feel your best, use your lifetime skills and experience, and make the coming months and years as fulfilling as possible.
I'm Lynn Winter Gross. Not Born Yesterday is brought to you by Next Village San Francisco, a local nonprofit providing older adults with support to help age in place, and by Assisted Living Locators, a San Francisco Bay Area senior care advisory service, helping families make informed decisions about senior care and living options.
Today on Not Born Yesterday, we're looking at caregiving once again. Although we've discussed this issue before, 1 in 5 American adults is now a caregiver, and many of us find ourselves unprepared for this task. How do we as caregivers take care of ourselves as well as our loved one is our subject today. Caregiving is a difficult and emotionally taxing task. As a caregiver himself, Roy Remer was inspired to write the book Zen Caregiving, How to Care for Yourself While Caring for Others. Mr. Remer is the executive director of the Zen Caregiving Project and developer of mindful caregiving education.
Roy, welcome to Not Born Yesterday.
It's wonderful to be here with both of you. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. In our society, caregiving usually starts as an act of love or duty, but it doesn't come with an instructional manual. Most of us are unprepared for the role. And when we think of the term caregiving, we often mean the patient, not the caregivers. In writing your book or dealing with caregivers, what made you think about the need to support caregivers?
I love this question. In terms of preparation, I kind of want to break it down into 2 buckets. One is people who find themselves in the role of family caregiver find themselves often unprepared for the practical aspects of caring for someone or supporting someone. And I really mean things like, how do you transfer a partner from their bed to a wheelchair? Or how do you change dressing on a wound? Or how do you administer medication? The other bucket is really the emotional burden that often comes with caregiving. So this is where the self-care piece comes in. How caregivers can use mindfulness, compassion, what I call loss awareness, to develop and build and sustain their emotional resilience. So when things get difficult, when their attitude or emotions begin to work against them, what are the things they can do to come back to a present, grounded, even inspired state to then, meet the challenges that may arise in caregiving? So, for years I sat at the bedside of people who were at the very end of their life. And then I kind of pulled back from that a little bit in my newer roles with the organization. And I was meeting people who were attending our caregiving classes, and I was really witnessing the suffering that they were experiencing. And so we developed this, what I believe is a wonderful curriculum for caregivers. But because I had had a career in book publishing, I kind of knew what it would take to wrestle or wrangle all of this content into the form of a book. And that began to feel really important because I could see that a lot of caregivers couldn't break away to take a class with us. So I wanted something that they could access at any point, maybe even in the middle of the night, because that's the only time they get to themselves.
use the term mindfulness a lot when you're talking about this subject. And I don't want people to turn off because they think it's going to be too touchy-feely. So could you define mindfulness for us and how it can make us better caregivers as well as taking care of ourselves in this role?
Sure. Yeah, and I appreciate what you're saying because, mindfulness can be thought of from a spiritual point of view, from a more touchy-feely, new agey point of view, but also a scientific point of view. And so there's a lot of wonderful research that's going on that demonstrates the benefits of cultivating mindful awareness. But, what we're really talking about is, and the definition that I like best is mindfulness is a state of being where we're paying attention to the present moment on purpose and without judgment. So mindfulness is really a way just to stay present with what's here and trust that we'll have plenty of time later to sort out all the issues that all of us encounter in life. But for now, I'm right here, right now, and it has a lot of benefits for me personally and the person I'm caring for.
Is this like meditation where you stop and take a deep breath and get your mind on your breathing instead of what's going on? Is it kind of the same?
It is kind of the same. I think of meditation as an activity, whereas I think of mindfulness as a state of mind or a state of being. So in the book, I spent a lot of time reassuring people that they don't actually have to take on a meditation practice in their life because that is a lot of work. It's daunting, If they were to go out and buy a meditation cushion and sit on the floor and ring the bell, burn a candle, beautiful. That's great. But we can use the activities that we already engage in on a daily basis, caring for someone or just, living our lives. We can use these activities as opportunities to cultivate and deepen mindful awareness and train the brain to keep coming back to present moment. So there's a lot of overlap, but really when I'm talking about mindfulness, I want people to understand it doesn't necessitate taking on a meditation practice because I hear from a lot of people, oh, I don't meditate very well. I just get so busy in the mind. Okay, that's fine. That's true for a lot of people. It's a really good place to start.
What are the biggest predictors of burnout for the caregiver?
So some of the higher burden caregiving situations are if you're caring for someone with mid-stage advanced dementia. I think people who find themselves in that role need to be especially careful that they're tending to their own needs before they get too close to that edge of burnout. So if someone is starting to feel despair, or if they're starting to feel like nothing they do makes a difference, those are red flags that would indicate that you're getting really close to burnout.
So, as you've been talking, I'm thinking there are a lot of emotional challenges in being a caregiver. And I think maybe caregivers think they're not allowed to be angry at the
Right.
situation, at the patient, at their own feelings of exhaustion or loss of control. So, what do you recommend as a way to deal with anger and stress? I mean, I hear about running or screaming or hitting a pillow. Do those things really work?
Well, I think they can work. Absolutely. I think, though, the most important thing is I'll put it this way, honor your own emotional experience. And part of honoring your own emotional experience is this idea of stepping back and being the observer of your own experience. So let's say the person I'm caring for could be my child, could be my partner, could be a friend. They say something unskillful. Maybe it's because they're living with some dementia, but maybe they're just very emotionally reactive. So they say something that is triggering or upsetting to us. When we have trained the mind to pause, then we get a little space between the behavior that's coming at us and our reaction. And when we get that pause, when we take that pause, then we can move from reactivity to response. So I'm still experiencing the anger, but I don't need to act from that place of anger. I can clearly advocate for my own needs, but I can do it in a skillful way that doesn't make the situation worse, right? And I think when we're highly reactive, it's not really helping the situation. Sometimes it feels good because the fire, the energy around anger is very enlivening. But if someone does something unskillful toward me and then I respond or react unskillfully, it just heightens the tension in the situation. It doesn't de-escalate. So every emotion manifests or expresses itself somewhere in the body. Anger often expresses itself like in the limbs. Like, we want to hit something, right? Hitting the pillow. So in a moment when I'm feeling angry, if I can attune to the sensations in my body, then what it does is it disrupts the thoughts that trigger the emotion. And emotions, the life cycle of an emotion is actually quite short, but it feels very long because the thoughts are repeated again and again that trigger the emotion, right? So if we can use the body as a place to direct our attention, it interrupts that thought process. It interrupts that thought emotion cycle that we get caught in, right? So something difficult happens. Okay, I feel my feet on the floor. Maybe I put my hand on my chest and I feel the beat of my heart. I take a breath in and out. And now I can say, you know what? What you just said, it causes me a lot of pain, doesn't work for me. I don't really want to be talked to that way. I want to be in this friendship, this relationship, but do your best to not talk to me that way. It's really different than, screaming at someone. Don't you dare talk to me that way. You get the idea.
Those are good words. I'm just taking them in. What about a caregiver's feelings of fear and sadness for what's ahead? What about the decline that's coming? How do they deal with that fear and the knowledge of loss ahead?
Mm. So there's a term for this. A lot of people will attend our classes and they'll talk about anticipatory grief. They can kind of see the trajectory of illness and where things are leading, and they project themselves into the future, and a lot of grief and sadness can come up. A lot of fear can come up. So, in some ways, I don't think there's anything wrong with that until it becomes debilitating. And when we notice that those anxieties, those fears, the sadness of anticipating what we think is going to happen in the future starts to get in the way of feeling connected to the person I'm with, when it prevents us from experiencing joy, calm, peace right here, right now. I think we can lean into these practices of coming back to what's true right here.
Earlier, you mentioned compassion fatigue. What is that, and how do caregivers deal with it?
I take time to explain what the experience of compassion is really comprised of. And there are 5 primary elements of compassion. The first one is just mindfulness or awareness of suffering, and then very naturally, most people, but not all people, but most people, once they are aware of someone else's suffering, they experience empathy. So we're all human, so we all know what it means to suffer. So we actually have a visceral experience in the body. And, the example I like to use that I think is really clear, maybe we're walking through the neighborhood and we see a small child fall off their tricycle and we like cringe because we know what it feels like to experience an accident or pain like that. So once we experience empathy, then typically there's a desire to see the suffering lessened or diminished. Now, the 4th stage is really key, and that's what we call compassionate action. We have motivation to actually do something about it. And the 5th stage is really lovely. It's called the warm glow. So when we do something when we act with compassion towards another, afterwards it feels good, and we should allow ourselves to fully experience that. So often, compassion fatigue arises when we're confronted with so much suffering that we feel like nothing we do is going to make a difference. Okay. And maybe the person I'm caring for is so miserable, they're in so much pain, they have so much emotional distress, and nothing I do matters. And so we start to get kind of worn down by that. Okay. So this is very similar to what's referred to as empathic distress. And that's the experience where we continuously have that kind of physical response to the suffering we're seeing, but we start to self-protect ourselves. So we don't follow through to actually taking action. And I want to be clear that sometimes the action is self-directed and not directed towards the person we're caring for. So for instance, let's say we're caring for someone, but they have a paid caregiver who's also with them in the home. And that person is on the scene, they're doing what needs to be done, but we have this inclination to do something, but we understand one more body, one more person in the room is not going to help. It may be a distraction. In those moments, we turn towards ourselves and we practice self-compassion. That's the action. And that actually helps us ward off both compassion fatigue and empathic distress, I would say, because it reminds us that I can take care of myself and I can hold my own experience in this. So, yeah, these are some of the things that caregivers can practice.
We've talked before on this show about issues for paid givers. They might be caring for several patients at a time, and they need to deal with different families at the same time. For both the paid giver and the family who's hired him or her, they might need outside help. What do you suggest?
Yeah, so paid caregivers, they play such an important role. And when someone's coming into the home, often they're part of this segment of the caregiving landscape known as direct care workers. They're often the lowest paid. A lot of these folks, they speak English as a second language, and they do amazing work, and they really get to know people that they're caring for. I think of them as the angels of our care system. And that takes nothing away from the amazing nurses, doctors, social workers, etc., or the family caregivers. But they need to be well resourced as well. Um, a lot of the direct care workers, they have pretty strong social support networks, so that really helps them. But a lot of them also would benefit, I think, from these kinds of practices that we're talking about. Because a lot of times what happens is, they go home at the end of a shift and they may not have the tools that allow them to, leave the emotional burden back behind them and they carry it with them. So I think, when I talk to home health care agencies, I'm always encouraging them to offer opportunities, to offer forums for their paid caregivers to come together and just talk about their caregiving experience. It's really, really important to share our story of caregiving and have it witnessed. So, if you're a friend or a family member of someone receiving care from a paid caregiver, or you could ask them questions about how they're doing. Like, what's it like for you to come into someone's home who you're meeting for the first time and deal with all their nuttiness that everyone has, and be willing to listen to what they have to share. I have found often they don't want to burden anyone with their stories. But if you really show curiosity and really convey to them that you're interested, then they'll start to share, and it's good for them, and thus it's good for the person that they're caring for.
Well, actually, I wanted to know how paid caregivers and family caregivers can elicit support from friends who aren't in that position right now, and what those friends should know. I mean, you've kind of touched on that, but I have
Yeah,
a friend whose wife was sick for a long time, and he said people would always say, "Oh, how's she doing?" He said nobody ever said to me, "How are you doing?"
nice.
And
Well, there you go.
yeah, so I'm just wondering how we who may not be caregivers now, but may all be in the future,
Yeah.
how we can support that person.
Thank you. So that's clear. Yeah, I get this question a lot, and I think it's really presence and curiosity. You know, even for those of us who weren't born yesterday, we carry around these powerful devices in our pocket, and they can be such a distraction. So we all know what it feels like to be in a conversation where someone's distracted by their phone, by what's going on around them, um, by their own need to hear or have their own story heard. We also know what it feels like to have a conversation with someone who is fully present, 100% there with us. Those conversations feel really different. So I think the greatest gift that someone can provide to a caregiver, whether it's a family caregiver or a paid caregiver, is just their full presence. Like, even if I only have 5 minutes, I am really here for this 5 minutes. And that comes across in our body language. It comes across in the questions we're asking. It comes across in the quality of our listening. And, I've come to believe after many years of being with people who are living with serious illness or living with terminal illness, being with people who are caring for someone who is ill, that what people crave most in those circumstances is, yeah, they all want to see cures. They want to see the illness taken away. But when they understand that's not going to happen, what they want most is this sense of deep human connection. They want to feel connected to something bigger than themselves. They want to be reminded that there's this bigger container that holds their much more narrow experience. And how do they get that? They get that through genuine presence. So, there are practical things, like you said, well, ask people how they're doing, or, just maybe show up with a baked good or a dish and be like, here, I don't need your time, but I made this for you because I'm thinking about you and I want you to know I'm thinking about you. A lot of caregivers feel very isolated. They feel like no one is tracking their experience. And, in saying this, I also want to say, you don't need to know the exact right thing to say. You don't even need to know the exact right thing to do. I think what people need to get more comfortable with is sitting in that place of presence where we don't know and we don't have to know. And for a lot of people, that's difficult. But there's so much, beauty that can emerge out of just this present moment experience where you show up and your intention is just to be there. And then you see what's asked for. But I think when someone's in the role of caregiver and people are trying things because they care about us, yeah, it gets noticed. It makes a difference for sure.
And you kind of mentioned that some of us may become caregivers in the future,
Mm.
and that we're watching what someone who's a caregiver now is doing. Do you have any sort of final advice for those who will become caregivers in the future?
Yeah, well, one is pay attention to the way people are doing it around you. None of us would be here today if it wasn't through the support and grace of people in our lives who really showed up for us in moments of need. So when we think back on who those people were, and not necessarily caregivers, but maybe, you know, an aunt or an uncle, maybe a grandmother, maybe a school teacher, but people who really showed up for us, we can think about, well, what were the qualities of their presence? How did they show up for me? And draw inspiration from those people. And also keep in mind that caregiving is just, it's an essential human experience, and it may not always be fun, but it is an initiation. Like we may feel challenged in the role, but we're learning things. We're learning really important lessons while we're in the experience, even if it goes on for years. And when it ends, and it will end because everything ends, we're going to come out of the experience with gifts of wisdom and knowledge that are really needed in the world around us. And so we need to give that knowledge away to others, to the young ones coming up behind us, because they'll be in the role someday. Maybe they'll be taking care of us, So the only other thing I would say is, start to cultivate some of these skills. Like learn how to drop into present moment awareness. Learn how to manage or work with or meet big emotions as they arise. Get really intimate with your emotional responses to the experience of loss. And as you all know, as I know, the older we get, the more loss we experience. And it's good when we can start to make our peace with it and just fold it into our experience of living, because it's not going to stop.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this unique and heartfelt approach to caregiving. And our listeners, if you want to get more information on this or share the episode with someone you think this can help, go ahead and pass on this episode to them. Our guest was Roy Remer, author of Zen Caregiving.
Thank you both.
Today on News You Can Use, we want you to know about a recent medical report that says walking fast keeps you more than physically fit. Researchers have found that people in their 80s who maintain a quick walking pace, dubbed super movers, are more likely to stay mentally sharp compared to their slower moving peers of the same age.
The staff at Albert Einstein Medical School analyzed data from nearly 4,000 older adults enrolled in a long-term aging study. Participants had taken a timed walking test, and the fastest 9% were considered super movers. The biggest takeaway was that the super movers are about 50% less likely to develop cognitive decline than their peers who are not super movers. The results are published in the medical journal Neurology. Walking requires balance, coordination, and strength, all of which depend on healthy muscles. Exercise makes your muscle grow, but it also makes your brain grow.
When we move, our muscles release signaling molecules that affect other body systems, including boosting brain cell growth and regulating metabolism. So muscle health is cognitive health. Final thoughts: if you're walking for health, keep it up. And if you can increase your speed a little bit, go for it. You don't have to run, just increase your pace. Your muscles and brain will thank you.
And that's our podcast for today. Our thanks to Roy Remer, author of Zen Caregiving, How to Care for Yourself When Caring for Others. You can learn more about Next Village San Francisco at their website, nextvillagesf.org, or by calling 415-888-2868. To learn more about assisted living locators, contact Senior Care Advisor Brent Hensley at BRENTH@assistedlivinglocators.com. Our theme music is from Hook Sounds, and Claire Winslow is our engineer. And we thank you for listening. We'd love to hear what you would like us to discover and discuss. Please contact us at notbornyesterdaypodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and LinkedIn, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. They're all free and let us know our audience better. Be well, stay strong, and remember, you weren't born yesterday. I'm Lynn Winter Gross.
And I'm Miriam Goodman.